Hi, so this is lesson 3.1 of Unity Training for Theatre, and we're going to learn about empties. An empty it can be two things. It can either be the root of your folder structure. You can have a little folder within your hierarchy in the scene view. It could also be something that you build anything else out of. So pretty much every object or component that you'd have in Unity is fundamentally an empty underneath. So a light is just an empty of a light component, and an audio source is an empty of an audio component. And when you create a light, you just jump in that step of having to load a component onto an empty. It's just built for you. And there's a few exceptions to that. So to build an empty, it's really easy. The way I do it, I go into the hierarchy, I right click and create empty. And it creates what is a game object. And you can see it's completely empty here in the inspector. It's just transform node. So I'm going to name that root. And that's now a folder. I could nest other objects underneath it. I'm going to add in another empty, and I'm going to build this also in the main root of the folder here. I'm going to call that tree. So it's a tree coming out of a root. Now if I want to, I can embed that into my root by clicking and dragging it, and I can drag it back out by putting it back into the root. So when it's in there, it's now a child of its parent, which is root. So tree is the child and root is the parent. If I move my root around, the tree moves with it. So it's got global position. So if I put it back to 0, just make it a bit easier to see. If I now move this around, you can see the gizmo's moved back and the tree is still with it. It says 0, 0, 0. That's because it's got local coordinate settings on it. So it knows where it is relative to its local tree. Now if you want to change it, you can click to global. And when you put settings in, it will tell you where it is relative to the real world, but you have to sort of choose that before you start. So let's put that back to 0. And let's create another one, but this time, rather than clicking on root, I'm going to click on tree and right click, create empty from there. And it automatically nests the object into the tree. So I'm going to call that branch. There we go. And now I've got that in there. Now, if I wanted to, I could drag the branch back to root, and now I've got tree and branch are of equal standing. They're both the children of the same actor and not parented to each other. But I'm going to leave it like this. And then what I'm going to do is just set this a little bit higher. I'll make that 1.8 meters. So the tree is 1.8 meters above the root. Incidentally, the y-axis is up and down in Unity. If you're not familiar, Maya, if you're my users, you'll find that quite normal. But for most 3D programs, particularly architectural programs, X and Y are the plane and Z is the height. And of course, in Unity, it's Y is the height because that's how a screen works. The screen is X along the bottom, Y along the screen, and then Z is the depth going backwards. So that's how that works. So now you'll find that root is on the floor. If you look at the gizmo, tree is 1.8 meters high, and the branch is in the same place. It says 0 meters because it's locally compared to the tree. It's in the same place, but you can see the gizmo hasn't moved. So if I jump from branch to root, it's going up and down. And inside the components, I can build anything I want. So I can turn this branch into a light just by loading a light as a light component. And now if I look at the directional light here, if you look at the inspector, nothing's changing apart from a few little values that we tweaked earlier. So I've turned my branch into a directional light. And I could just go tree, right click, light, directional light, and that's just created me a directional light. And you'll see they are identical apart from, say, one value that's different for some reason. So that just demonstrates that an empty really is just that, is empty. What you have got though is the ability to move things as a folder structure with a tree system. So what I tend to do is build two empties that will be my venue, or sometimes I call it stage, and another one which is my scenery, and I might call it even Act 1, Scene 2. There we go. And then that will be my node that clusters together all of those objects. So anything to do with that scenery will sit in there as a child, and then you can turn it on and off. So you've got a little tick box up here. If I click that off, it just turns off everything to do with that object and its tree. Now if I turned off tree here in the middle of my root, it will also turn off branch, but it won't turn off the root above it. So the parent always stays. It only ever affects what's underneath. So I can turn that back on again. If I turn off root, it will turn off root, tree and branch and all the components that are connected to it. So I might also create my lights. And I might separate this into venue lights and stage lights, and then I might have my lights as a subfolder in venue. You get the idea. So I'm going to drag directional lights in there. Now if I turn off my lights folder, the light object turns off as well. In this case, the light is also the sun, so it's not going to do very much, but let's put both of those in there. And there we go. If I had any 3D objects in the scene, it would see it working. So I'm going to delete that because we don't need that, and I'm going to delete this, I'm going to delete this. But you start to get the idea of how empties could be used. They're both a way of managing your folder, keeping yourself organised, but they're also a way of being able to move and control objects. So if you wanted something to spin around something else in the scene, or you wanted to move something relative to another object, which also has to move, then you could cluster them together with empties, and the empties don't have to have any information at all. Another common thing they get used for is to place your scripts or to have managers. So you might create like a scene manager or a UI manager, which handles all of your scripts, and you just put those together there with a component that's focused on listening to button clicks, for instance, and that can just sit there, not in the scene, doesn't have to be doing anything in particular, but it's just listening and controlling some of the back end parts of Unity in your project. So that's the end of empties. In the next lesson, we're going to go on to shapes and how we can build 3D objects.